This is super exciting to be up here on this panel. It's the male version. We have the yesterday. A lot of talk about love. I don't know how much talk we're going to have about love up here today. But we'll see.
Why don't you invite one of the female to take my place?
You don't get out of it that easily.
But I'm going to get opportunity to speak at 5:30 for a long time. Okay. I'll be happy to.
Okay, I'm just going to give Graham a second to attach himself. Now, I missed Graham's talk today. I was actually on the tour, doing a little personal time. But I understand you were sort of rabble-rousing, calling for revolution, transformation, change. And I guess I'm wondering, many of us have thought about this time as one of intense transformation. Jeff's been looking at 2012 and this idea of DMT activation. Maybe we could all go through and sort of give our individual perspectives. I mean, do we see that, somehow the reaccessing of this ancient knowledge that Freddy is working on, that has, a very important, role in some new development that could happen? I don't know Satish's work that much, but you'll I'm sure, be able to fill us in on how you see, a positive, maybe how you see a positive transformation unfolding in human society at this time that is so full of crisis and danger, but also tremendous opportunity. So maybe you want to start, and we'll go down the...
Should I start?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Please consider me as an honorary woman. Hopefully, in my next incarnation, I will be a woman. And I would love to be a mother. I think the next transformation and change we need in our world is the resurgence of, or resurrection of, the feminine values. Our world is dominated by masculine principles and masculine values. We need masculine as well as feminine, but we need feminine more at this moment because there is a kind of gigantic, overblown, exaggerated male principle at work in the world today. Eventually, we need a balance of the two, dance between the masculine and the feminine. And when that dance happens, then there's a harmony. The first principle of the universe is that harmony, that wholeness. And when you know your harmony, then you are a scientist. Knowledge is science. So knowing harmony is science. And when you express that harmony through words, through movement, through colors, through sound, music, then it becomes arts. So expression of harmony is art. And when you practice harmony in your own life and live harmoniously with yourself, with your husband, with your wife, with your children, with your neighbors, with natural world, with the trees, with the rivers, when you live in harmony, practice harmony, then it becomes religion or spirituality. So religion is not in the church, religion is not in the Bible or Quran or the books, religion is not in gurus, religion is in your life when you live harmoniously. So harmony between male and female principle, that balance, that dance, will be the right thing to start with. And when we can tell the scientists, as Graham did very eloquently today, tell the scientists there's no conflict between science, arts, and spirituality. Because science is only knowledge. And we need knowledge, we need science. But that's not enough. Knowing is not, we have to express it. So we have to be artists. And we have to live it. Then we are a religious, spiritual people. So where is the conflict? So a world without conflict will be an harmonious relationship between science, arts, and spirituality.
A lot of the prophecies talk about this transition that we're approaching in terms of a birth process. And it's in the birth of a new consciousness, people have to address the build-up of negative issues before being able to treat other people in a compassionate way. So my own method for addressing my own negative issues is I find they come up quite easily while you're driving. It kind of what people call road rage, you know. So I think we should all be very aware while driving of this stuff bubbling up inside us and stamp on it before you, what's the terminology about stopping the wheel of karma? Because if you don't, you pass it on to someone else and they pass it on to someone else. So I think, you know, if we can all just start in a small way like that, then at least we've made a start on the process.
Very good. Very good.
I had the fortunate experience of having been born in a country that was renowned for being a center of Catholicism. So if you weren't born into the Catholic scheme of things, I'm Portuguese by birth, by the way. I know you can tell by my accent. It struck me very early on in life that there's something wrong with a God that chastises you for everything. In a culture that unless you show up for church and you bow to certain people that are dressed in a certain way, you basically get put in a box that's about this big for about 3 hours in the dark, and that was only 5 back then. And I never quite understood how this concept of religion could be so loving, and the concept of a God that had so much dark energy about it could be so loving. Then I became an atheist for many years, understandably. And then I got involved with crop circle research, and I had some very unique experiences, which I wrote about in the first book, which led me to actually experience the purpose of sacred space, and that was the whole concept of self-awareness. The fact that when you work with certain energetic environments, which are, let's say with the Gothic Cathedral, it's a geometric shape which is situated on a certain magnetic hotspot which creates its own energy environment. And of course, you are made of exactly the same things. You're made of electromagnetism, you're made of magnetite, and your cells are geometric. So when you place yourself in these environments, something unique happens to you. And it was within those moments where I was given and shown a shamanic experience, much like you were saying this morning, Graham, without the vomiting, of course. Which I believe is why temples were built, because if you don't want to stomach ayahuasca, then you just go to the temple instead. But I found very much the same way, was that these temples that were built all across the face of the earth were built for that exact reason, and that was for you to have your own shamanic experience, so that you can experience what it's like to be in perfect balance with your masculine and your feminine. And during my research, looking at the origin of sacred sites, I was struck by the amount of places that were built before 3100 BC that were all dedicated to the divine feminine. And then suddenly something went very, very different. All the temples suddenly began to switch to masculine energy or solar energy. And they always preceded a period of great calamity, usually within a 50-year period where suddenly we get hit by a meteorite or there'd be massive tectonic activity, and there's a massive temple construction building around the world. But the one thing I've noticed over the years is that there are some places on the face of the earth that are both masculine and feminine. And that's where I find the balance. And I find that technology, that spiritual technology, is still hardwired onto the face of the earth to get you to remember this process. And some of these places, you will, if you travel to them, and we're not very far from them. I mean, right here in Glastonbury Abbey, we have the masculine and the feminine buildings of the abbey right behind us. you can actually experience the joy of what it is to actually come in contact with the balanced state of affairs that allows you to discover self-empowerment. And when you have self-empowerment, you are in total control of the direction of your life. You take control for the bad times and the good times, because let's face it, when you come down here, you chose this because it's all about an experience. There's nothing else to do in the universe, so I've been told by a lot of trance mediums, except to have an experience. That is it. It was very disappointing. You go through life, you reincarnate, you come back into a different body, and all there is to do is build up an experience. And the more you are aware of the experience, the more you grow as a soul. So for me, the whole purpose of this point of change in our lifetime is to accept the fact that you are here on a journey, an individual journey, and the more you open your eyes and use the tools that are available to you, the more you dream that dream awake. So welcome to the shamanic experience.
Could I ask you something before Graham speaks?
I don't know.
Talked about it, you talked about Catholic. Now, in old Catholic Renaissance time and before that, there was a very important place called Mary. And if you go to Siena, Maesta, Her Majesty, she is the main figure of worship. So even in Catholic tradition, used to be much more respect and reverence for feminine principle. Yeah. But suddenly this Protestant and later on, post-Renaissance, became even more masculine.
Totally.
Yeah.
And same thing with temples as well. There's suddenly this develop. It's energy. It's like I said earlier, energy. And if you do a lot of this work, you'll understand this. I didn't know this until I actually did it physically, and I go to all these places around the world, and I start inquiring about energy, understanding it, feeling it, making it a very tactile experience. And you can get drunk on it. I mean, your ego suddenly, if you watch yourself, your ego starts developing. And I admit it. I mean, I suddenly got very arrogant about things. And I had also the fortunate experience of having some good teachers that would say, you have to watch yourself. Yeah. And you're able to step back and say, okay, I don't know everything. I can actually say, okay, I've done the best I can, but now I can fix it. Yeah. And that's what I've seen over life, is that the energy does get to you. Yeah. And that's how the solar male-dominated power of life takes people over. You get drunk on it. It's, as a friend of mine says, it's just humans being.
Yeah.
I feel that we should be aware that there are huge forces at work in our society, which are enormously funded with our money to keep us asleep. This is not simply a passive state. We are actively plunged into sleep. And into unconsciousness by the society that we live in. And we're plunged into all manner of illusions. I was speaking earlier about the fear and the hatred and the suspicion which are swirling around our world at the moment. And you can see that in every case, these are actually manufactured. These seem to be designed to force us to focus on our divisions and to stop us moving within and learning what we really are. The Gnostics had a notion that there was a kind of battle in the universe, and that this notion may be very offensive to many who've been reared in the Christian tradition, but from the Gnostic point of view, the God that Christians call God, the God worshipped by Jews, the God worshipped by the Muslims, whether we call him Allah, Jehovah, God, whatever, he's actually a kind of demon who has inserted himself into the human fabric in the cleverest possible way. He has pretended that he is God, and he has convinced us to worship him. And what he thrives on is human admiration and obeisance. He does not want us to achieve our potential in any way. He wants to shut it down. They called him an archon, not a deity, and they said it was an illusion to believe that this thing, which has caused so much suffering and so much misery down the thousands of years, was any kind of god at all. They called him a sort of handyman, a craftsman, who had jumped himself up into station and imposed himself upon us. So I think we have to recognize that in the fear and hatred and suspicion that are circulating in the world right now, there's absolutely no doubt that the mainstream religions are, as Keisha said, are a huge contributing factor to this. There are many other contributing factors, this framework within which we live called society, the military-industrial complex, vast business interests, and most of all, a message that the life we lead is fundamentally meaningless, that we can only define ourselves in terms of production and consumption, that there really is nothing more to the human creature. This is a very powerful message which throughout the whole of the 20th century more and more has been beamed at us from every possible loudspeaker, subtly and blatantly, in every possible way, and we take it in with our mother's milk. So there's a huge job to be done, really, if we're going to make a better world. But I really believe that we can do it, and it starts. I think the place it starts is the only place that any of us have got any control, which is ourselves. Actually, that's the one thing we can work on. You can't go work on another person. It's a bit arrogant to do that. You can share ideas, but another person should not be your project. Your project is yourself. Your project is yourself. That's what you're responsible for, and that's what you can control. So at every level, it is possible, every decision, every choice, to ask yourself, am I nurturing or am I toxic? And to do something about it. And I think that, to me, that's a very empowering notion. It's extremely difficult to make ourselves better people. It's extremely difficult to overcome a lifetime of bad habits, but we can begin the work. And if we all do begin the work, I think the results can be dramatic. And I'm already seeing the consequences of that positive force that is emerging all around the world.
There you go.
A thought that's been occurring to me being back at Glastonbury after a few years is, of course, probably many people here know that Glastonbury has a lot of relationship to the Grail myth, you know. They talk about, that Joseph of Arimathea, I guess, came here with the Grail, and it was maybe in the Abbey and is hiding out somewhere. And I was thinking about the Grail legend, right? Like, where ultimately, Parsifal's asked this question, whom does the Grail serve? Right? Do you guys know what the answer was?
Remind us.
Whom does the Grail serve? Well, the answer that he came to at the end of his life after many decades of searching, and he had this encounter when he was very young, then he had it again when he was very old. The answer was the Grail serves the Grail King. And I was just wondering, being here in Glastonbury, in this place that is part of this mythos, and maybe thinking about how myth and history are kind of weaving back together. Does that idea of the Grail, what does it mean to you? What does it mean to say the Grail serves the Grail King?
The notion, I'm back, I'm online now. Sorry, was I completely inaudible the last time? I was chattering away, I thought, it's fine. Interestingly, in the Grail story, the health of the king is connected to the health of the land. The wasteland, there's a sickness at the heart of the king, then there's a sickness at the heart of the land. And
the king has a wound that will not heal.
That will not heal, a wound in the thigh. It's a most curious and challenging story, quite a quest in itself, actually, to read and study the Grail myths. It does seem to me to be about personal transformation and about discovering that hidden mystery within ourselves. I think there are many physical objects to which the Grail can be attached, and I think it has been attached to different objects. A cup, I've suggested the Ark of the Covenant, other possibilities, but ultimately I think it's a personal transformation that's going on in the Grail story.
Yeah, I would agree that as well. It's very symbolic. I mean, some people look at the Grail as being part of, say, the map of Stonehenge, where if you look at the actual map of the stones, and they're all in various circles, and there's a couple of areas where the stones form a cup, a two-dimensional cup, like a horseshoe. people see that as being part of the Grail quest, where the temple itself is the repository of some kind of energy or form, where if you interact with the temple at a certain time of the year, then you become a repository of that energy, which allows for a shamanic experience that allows you to find out what it is that you're doing here. So there is that portion of the Grail quest, which is a personal journey of discovery to know thyself. And by knowing more about yourself and how the universe works and how you work with it as a chemical, electronic being, the more you come to realize that you have a certain control over the events over your life, because everything's about atoms, it's about electricity, it's about magnetism. And the more you realize, for example, the events that were done in Princeton University, where the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Department, and you can read their abstracts online. I believe they're still online. And they were basically trying to blur the distinction between science and mysticism. And some of the experiments actually do show how you, as a conscious being, can have an effect on things like, let's see if I remember one of their projects. Yes, it was a group of 22 people that were stuck in a room, and their sole intent, their unique intent, was to fundamentally change the beat of a computer. So there's this drum machine in the middle of the room that's giving out a little electronic beat. And the whole purpose of these 22 people was to focus their intent, which is basically a series of electromagnetic packets, to change the beat of the actual machine. And you know what? They actually managed to do it. So when you have that kind of science that's able to prove that you, as an animate object that's made of flesh and bone and all kinds of things, can have that kind of control over a machine, then imagine what you can do, not just for yourself, but how you can become an example that then changes the world around you, and then you show that as a living example to others to follow, and hopefully they'll have the same experience, and it allows the world suddenly to become a much better place. And that's essentially what part of the Grail quest is all about.
Well, King Arthur is said to have come to Avalon to have his wound healed. Well, in Taoist alchemy, they speak of manipulating the chi in the body by a series of exercises, and the result of that is to create in the head a sort of something that sounds very much like a grail, a receptacle full of some magical substance that will then enable you to externalize yourself into a kind of an astral body that will enable you to become immortal in some way.
That's related to the pineal gland, for instance, or?
Yeah, the Chinese, I've forgotten what they call it. It's called the cauldron. Yeah, it gives us that Grail sort of idea. Mm. But in Glastonbury, we got a local author called John Cousins who's looked at the history of the place, and he's found that people that come to Glastonbury, they go through a kind of process. Something happens to them, but they kind of get stuck, and the process isn't finished off. And he thinks that this was a deliberate attempt by Henry VIII's men to sort of stop the energies from Glastonbury working properly. And, well, he thinks that the whole process can be corrected by having a symbolic ceremony where we gather the bits of the abbot back from where they were taken to and have a ceremony in the abbey to sort of reconstitute the whole thing, and the whole thing would have to be looked upon and approved by the Bishop of Bath and Wells, who was the one originally was responsible for the original event that with the destruction of the abbey and just the murder of the abbot, etc. But yes, there is something special about the energies here that it seems that the monks knew something about that and how to guide people through this process of inner transformation when they came here, because it was originally an island. People didn't live here originally. And it seems that they came here to go through a special process. And what I was saying about the way that magnetite can be, when you go to sacred sites, the magnetite in your pineal gland, according to Albert Budden's research, when it is slowly magnetized by sacred sites, then it's a much more beneficial effect that you get from it. than if it's changed by sudden events. So this could be part of what, how we are supposed to interact with sacred sites like Glastonbury.
Every word has many meanings. In Sanskrit we say shabdarth, which means literal meaning, bhavarth, which means contextual meaning. The word means in the context of something. Bhavarth, gudharth, which is more a kind of symbolic or a deep meaning, etc., etc. There are various words. So the word grail and king also have different meanings in different times, the way we use it. It's not just literal. And for me, Grail is within. The inner landscape and the outer landscape are one. And so when we are looking for Grail, it's not a place. It's everywhere, it's nowhere, and it's within. And the king is the same for me. King is not what we call the ruler of the land, although I agree with Graham that the ruler was identified with the land. And in ideal situation, king lived a very simple, frugal, and very ecological lifestyle, very close to people. That was the ideal king, and also representing the divine. But for me, king is the masculine and queen is the feminine. So every man is a king in that deep meaning, and every woman is a queen. And therefore, in Indian language, when we speak husband, wife will call husband Raja, which means king. And the husband will call his wife Rani, which means queen. So if I write in Hindi to my wife, I'll say, dear Rani, dear queen. So she's queen of my heart. She is queen of my heart. And so so when you say Grail will serve the king, it's a Grail within, and it will serve you. And you are a microcosm of the macrocosm. You are the universe. So when it is serving the king, serving you, it's serving the whole earth, because you are connected. The sun, the moon, the rain, the land, the earth, air, fire, water, everything of the universe is within you. Your body is made of all the elements of the universe. So for deep meaning, if we go, then the Grail serving the king is also serving the queen and serving you. And then in Sufi tradition, the story is that when God was putting the Adam out of the Garden of Eden, Adam is worried and sad. He says, God, you are forsaking me, putting me out of this beautiful Garden of Eden without you. I have to live without you. How can I survive without you? God, no, I'm not forsaking you. I'm coming with you. How? I'm coming with you as Eve. So that's the deep meaning of Grail and the king.
Not dog then. No.
So I know in a number of your works, many of you, I don't know about you, but certainly the three of you have looked at this idea that there is potentially there was a higher knowledge, an ancient knowledge that might even have a non-earthly origin. If you look at the crop circles, it doesn't seem like they're being made by farmers. They're the really extraordinary ones. As you've written about in great depth. I believe you've also covered that in your work. And we're seeing around the world over the last few years extraordinary sightings of UFOs becoming more and more common. We're seeing more and more phenomena that seem to go against our normal understanding of things. For instance, the Norway spiral, this huge spiral that appeared in the sky the morning that Obama, before Obama made his really terrible Nobel Peace Prize speech, which was justifying a just war doctrine. So I guess what do you guys think is happening? I mean, is there a presence that's maybe ascended spiritual beings, or actually a kind of galactic federation, as so much of our pop culture has been projecting over the decades? I mean, is there something that's trying to reach out to us or indicate that it's available to us? And if so, what do we do?
Can I start?
Yeah.
I think there is something that's trying to reach out to us. As I said in my talk, I think there is undoubtedly a phenomenon, and it's growing. But the thing that I think we're jumping too soon and just narrowing that phenomenon down to say this has got to be these high-tech aliens. They got better tech than us.
I wasn't saying that.
No, I know, but a lot of people do. A lot do. This is the general view. And in fact, when I've suggested that UFO and alien abduction experiences might be more of a spiritual phenomenon, really, or a psychic phenomenon than a purely physical, this world phenomenon, a number of people have got very angry with me. Those have, of course, included mainstream science, but they've also included the UFO lobby, who definitely want them to be physical aliens with high tech.
Well, okay, but I mean, there was also very interesting evidence. Like there was a major crop circle that appeared, I think, last summer or the summer before, that had these kind of symbols, almost like a language on it, and that those symbols had also appeared on imagery that this guy who claimed to be reverse engineering alien technology for the U.S. government in the Carrot Project had presented these photographs, and they were seen with similar imagery. So I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be either or. It could be at both ends.
Yeah, it could be both. I think it's I think we live in a vastly more complex and nuanced totality than it's easy for us to be aware of, and at certain times, certain individuals, certain moments of heightened spiritual state or great anxiety or stress, or under the influence of our plant helpers, can just see a little bit more.
In Southern Utah, for instance.
In Southern Utah, for instance, a great place to work with the plants, that we get a glimpse through into this, and we're desperately trying to put a name and a shape onto it, and I think somehow we need to let the phenomenon unfold a little more before we label it. That's what
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. It's almost as if part of us is trying to project something of physical shape that a kind of a symbol that makes us comfortable.
Well, people are seeing them all over the skies.
All over the skies.
Oh, absolutely.
And in their bodies too.
I mean, something that we're
implants are also real. I mean, they have actually happened. Yeah. So there's a physical aspect to this. Can I just say Jung on flying saucers? It's not.
People checked out that book, Carl Jung's book on flying saucers. It's a good read, guys.
It's not well known that Carl Jung devoted a small but very excellent volume to the subject of flying saucers. And he said at the end of that his conclusion is that flying saucers are 99% a psychic phenomenon and 1% a physical phenomenon. And he said they leave traces on radar screens, objects in our bodies, and so on. And he said, I don't want to dwell on that physical phenomenon too much, because if I do, it opens a bottomless abyss at my feet. It became very, very, very worrying. Anyway, good book to read.
In my experience of my early research with crop circles led me to the personal experience that the whole thing was indeed a very non-physical phenomenon that was behind the whole creation. In fact, we got very close as a small research team into understanding the origin of the circle makers. And I don't mean the circle makers that are actually the free guys called Team Satan, just to make sure you don't get confused, who do make a certain amount of crop circles a year, and well funded by the MI6, but I won't go to that. Because in my understanding, I wanted to approach the whole thing from a very non-judgmental point of view, which is usually a good place to start, because you don't bring your own personal baggage into it. And I remember a couple of experiments that I activated back in 1999, where I had had certain experiences of, we're all pretty comfortable with this, of being levitated in a crop circle and actually being taken out of the body. And as I said earlier, I'm an atheist because of my upbringing. So for me to have that experience and actually connect to a series of beings who are very non-physical and yet incredibly loving, and then being able to actually get together with a group of people from different parts of life, for example, a couple of psychics, an accountant, a book editor, a mathematician, and a computer designer, and asked each one of them, because every single season back then, when we were getting a lot of real crop circles, each season would give you a certain picture of what was being developed that year. We were given a story. And towards the end of the season, by the end of by the end of August, we'd get the season finale. And it was my idea to try and track the crop circles for 1999 based on the intuitive ability of these 6 different people from different points around the world. And incredibly, I didn't tell any of these people that they were part of a project. I didn't want anybody to think that they could collate information, call each other up and say, well, what did you tell them? Because I'll tell them the same thing. That wouldn't work. And incredibly, all of these people from different walks of life were able to pinpoint exactly in the same field in the whole of the British Isles where the biggest crop circle of the season was going to be, to actually define the exact geometry that it would be. And the funniest part is, none of us could figure out the actual time. Because as we know, time is a human construct to most degrees. We were within a 4-day period of time. And by the time came down to actually looking at the exact field and what was going to be there and actually survey it, we actually came down to within a 48-hour period where we felt something was going to manifest. And to cut a very long story short, I even rented a plane, took over that field at the specific time that we thought it was going to appear. And sure enough, this crop circle did appear and manifest on that field exactly where 6 people said it was going to be, and to the exact shape as well. So this force can be connected with, it can be communicated with. And it just, and for me, it told me that not only can it be communicated with, but it shows that the power of our ability to cross over different levels of dimensions and achieve contact with people and beings who are exist and are perfectly physical on their level of reality, but we can't perceive that as such.
Yeah, I did originally think through studying various stories about contactee events that the whole thing would be explicable solely from an astral projection, out-of-body experience sort of angle. Then I spent 6 days at the Laughlin UFO conference, and I became convinced that there is a physical component to this. You can't oversimplify this thing. And last year I spent 6 hours with 2 contactees, which was pretty incredible. I mean, one of them was actually taken while flying a hang glider.
That's annoying.
Yes. And he came back to the glider some while later, struggling to keep it under control, far out to sea. His friend was way back on the land, having fallen asleep underneath his hang glider. But just before the missing time started, his friend, who was on the phone to him, said, "What the hell's that thing?" And there's something came out of the sea underneath him and hovered next to him, and that's when his memory stopped. And then he came back. He was floating around in this thing, managed to get back to the cliffs, woke his friend up. There's lots of other people there now with their gliders built, saying, "Where did you come from?" And he says, "Well, just over there." And they say, "No, you didn't." And anyway, they looked at their watches. It was time to rush off back home and pick the kids up. And in the car, he noticed he was getting blistering, and he ended up going to the hospital. And they kept asking him what had done this to him. They didn't have any explanation for it. And eventually, they really got annoyed with him and said, "Where have you been? Tell us what happened." And he told them, and he got locked up in a psychiatric ward.
So he was right.
So it took him quite a long time to get out of that situation. Anyway, something that transpired in my conversation with these 2 guys, in fact, I actually discovered something when talking about this, that this runs in families, that this abduction experience is something where it was happening to their children, and it had also happened to their parents. The thing I think about this is you don't have to believe anything. People come up to me and say, "What do you believe?" Well, I've always been someone who kind of sits on the fence, and I suppose I was given the opinion by my parents that's a sort of wishy-washy kind of thing to do. You really got to commit yourself to some angle and then stand and defend your position. But when you are sitting on the fence, you're able to take on new information. As soon as people jump onto one belief system, they then start to defend that belief system and edit out any new information that might be significant. And if you look at quantum physics...
What if you keep as one of your beliefs the belief that you metaprogram your own belief system?
That's a good one. But yeah, if you look at quantum physics and you look at the sub-molecular world, things start behaving in one set of experiments, they behave like particles, in another one, they behave like waves. So they started calling wavicles. But, you don't have to... You use the model that is most appropriate for the moment, but be prepared to give it up, and then that way you're behaving in the most intelligent way because you're able to take on any new information and you're not censoring anything.
But what if belief is a constituent force in the universe, and without it you kind of create a self-limitation also?
I'll have to think about that one.
Okay. I respect your interest in it and your question, but I would like to stay in the mystery. It's beautiful to live in the mysterious world. We don't have to explain everything. We don't have to define everything. So for me, it's a mystery. And I enjoy living in the mystery. And you don't have to believe, but you don't also have to disbelieve. So belief is a difficult word for me. I don't believe in anything, because believing means, as you said, closing the door. I believe in God, or I believe in Christianity, or I believe in this motherhood and apple pie. You can believe and close the door. I keep my heart open, my mind open. I live in the mystery, and what I experience, what I know, what I experience, I enjoy it. But I also enjoy mystery. I also enjoy not knowing. We don't have to know everything. When Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself, he didn't say, know your neighbor. Even if you don't know your neighbor, still love them. So even if I don't know UFOs, I love them.
In fact, you remind me of something, if I can just add to that. You reminded me of an experience that I used to work with a group in Wiltshire with a wonderful trance channel called Isabel Kingston, a good friend of mine. She's the kind of trance medium that the police go and knock on her door, cap in hand, saying, we need some help finding a body on the murderer. And she goes, sit yourselves down, have a nice little cup of tea. And while she's there, she'll go, oh, he's buried behind the red barn, and do you want a license plate number to go with that? Good. Free sugars or two. And she's that kind of self-effacing person. She's exceptional. And during one of the times that we had as a group where she transmits information under trance, we're able to connect with a group consciousness who have, they say that they have manifested in the physical world so many billions of times, they don't need to manifest anymore. They are light, pure light. To which, of course, we then go, but who's above you? Who's pulling the strings? And they said, and this is directly to your question, and they said, well, we don't want to know. We perceive that above us there is another realm of pure light, even more pure than ours. And we don't want to know what it is because we want to remain in a certain mystery. Otherwise, there'd be nothing to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very good.
So you...
Lovely.
But on the other hand, it seems like there's an element of the modern mind that wants to probe and to know. You know, that seems to be part of our, in a way, our developmental process of our evolution. You know, we want to learn more about the natural world, more about the supernatural world. You know, it seems to me that that's a healthy part of our growing.
Yeah.
So we have a few more minutes. I don't really see a setup for a mic. I would invite, if people have like a super strong desire to simply ask a short question, because we don't have very much time, we can set up a mic. Do you have one?
What is the answer?
Or you can just come up here, and but it really has to be, because we really have a very short time, and just to maximize our opportunity here, let's what's that? Okay, you tell me the question, I'll repeat it. How's that?
I'd like for Jeff Stray to highlight one of the things that he put in the very end of his book, which tied in the relationship between the Monroe Institute and the possible. Do you remember the very last paragraph about what you said about the Monroe Institute?
No.
Okay, so she's
He's got a copy of Jeff's book.
Our esteemed colleague would like Jeff to comment. I'm repeating the question as I was asked, so for the recording. I'm going to repeat the question for the recording. She wants you to comment on, I guess, a point you made at the end of your book, connecting the Monroe Institute, which is the out-of-body research, into something or other.
It's coming back, I think. They had somebody at the Monroe Institute wired up while they were coming out of body, and they found that the actual polarity of the body reversed as they came out of their body. And I extrapolated from that maybe if we are looking at a situation where we're looking at a massive incursion of or movement of the Earth's geomagnetic field, that might involve a spontaneous sort of push for people's astral bodies or out their subtle body to shift into an out-of-body state. That's, I think, what you're referring to, yeah?
Any other short burning question? Yeah.
As the sir said about we need to have the knowledge, that's important to have the knowledge in the way to be more deep in enlighten ourselves and be more consciousness. We as a group and you as a master have some kind of plan to take this wonderful message and this wonderful knowledge to put in some nations that really now are in this unconsciousness and practically darkness. We have a plan.
Do we, as whatever we are, I'm not going to say masters, but do we have a plan to take this wonderful knowledge and bring it to so many nations in the world that are still in the kind of state of unconsciousness and maybe ignorance because of that unconsciousness? And what's the plan, guys? I have a plan.
Robin and Cody are in charge of that department, aren't they?
Well, I've been on permanent tour for 11 years, and I gave up my 14-year-old marriage and my house to promote this around the world. And I'm a Taurian. I'm supposed to be a grounded person that likes sitting at home. So it's not easy, but that's what I do.
I mean, I guess what I did is I started a company called Evolver, and we have a volunteer social movement called the Evolver Social Movement. We now have 50 groups that meet up in cities around the world. And yeah, the idea is to raise consciousness and then to use social media, the new aspects of social networks, digital technology. There seems, and obviously Robin and Cody are doing something similar with their Cafe Cody initiative. Transition Town is another interesting one, the Zeitgeist social movement, though those are more material focused, purely. I think that we're seeing with the development of social networks and social technologies, the possibility of knowledge being spread extremely quickly around the world, translated. I mean, you even have Google Translator now and so on. So that's basically what what I've been giving my oomph to. Personally, I'm also working on a concept for a global event on December 21st, 2012. You can look up, the website is unifyearth.com, and the idea is to, actually I have a friend, Mark Healy, who should be in the audience somewhere, who has created a grassroots initiative called Peace 2012.
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier.
What's that? Okay, good. Yeah, so we're kind of working together or in parallel paths. The idea of using this moment, which has now become so kind of ingrained in the popular culture as often a very destructive moment. In fact, there's even a new Britney Spears video, Till the End of the World, which begins with the text, December 21st, 2012, then shows like all these comets hitting the Earth, and then everybody runs underground like a huge rave in the underground. But anyway, there was that, there was the 2012 film, obviously, and you actually have a lot of young people who are seriously scared about what's going to happen and really have shut down. They believe that the world potentially is going to come to an end or something horrible is going to happen. So our idea is really to take the focus on that date, because nobody knows what's going to happen. Maybe the only thing that's going to happen is what we make happen, and repurpose it to show the most positive possible outcome for humanity. And so a combination of a grassroots global movement with maybe a spectacle, kind of Cirque du Soleil style, a little bit of glitz, culminating in a moment of peaceful focusing on unity and meditation, using whatever language is appropriate to every different culture. But, and if you could do that, we now know through the Global Consciousness Project at Princeton University, those kind of global moments are actually measurable and have represent a kind of spike in coherence. So maybe there's a way you could engineer a kind of a shift into a higher frequency of consciousness.
Yeah. I personally do not have a plan. I just feel that there's so much, so horrendously wrong with the way things are structured at the moment, and somehow I see some of that, and I just feel my job is to talk about it and write about it and kind of help others to waken their own innate power and energy in this field. So I don't have a plan. I just want to deconstruct the existing system, which is already deconstructing itself, but is managing to create this illusion of continuance, which is not going to be the case. And I'm really so happy that Daniel and Ken and others at Evolver and Reality Sandwich have taken this initiative, because this is going to the next step and saying, well, what are we actually going to do in this new world when the old falls away? And they're doing something about it. And I've traveled around America, and I found Evolver groups in so many cities who are awake and alive, young, thoughtful people who are filled with love as well. This is the other thing, a tremendous amount of love. That's what I sense in this movement. So I think it's a wonderful thing that this is happening.
I had to pay him a lot for this.
Yeah, a lot. I tell you, this is endorsement. But it's one of the things that I've seen, a real practical solution, but filled with vision and imagination. And I have a huge amount of respect for Evolver and Reality Sandwich and what you're doing there. So yeah.
Do you want to see it?
Well, I was just going to say that your old friend John Hoops is an anthropologist who's actually one of the main proponents of trying to pour cold water on the subject of 2012. He specialises in the Maya. But he used to be, you and him had a bit of a conversation on the year 2012 discussion group about the time Daniel's book first came out. And since then, Hoops has become the moderator. Yeah. He's become the moderator of this huge group. It's the biggest discussion group on the subject. And he's also, he's a professor at Texas, University in Texas, and, Kansas rather. And I became convinced that to spend that amount of time, I know how much time it takes to run a discussion group, that he must be getting some help. And I got him to admit that his main interest in this topic as an anthropologist is that he thinks something will happen in 2012, but it will be happening by mass focusing on that time and the build-up that people like us are creating. But so as an anthropologist, he finds that interesting, but for him, that means it's fake. But it doesn't mean that to me at all.
No.
Thank you for that question, because it gives me and others chance to make some commercials. I have been editing Resurgence magazine, and this is our 45th anniversary. and I would like the circulation of Resurgence. My plan is to make circulation of Resurgence. At the moment we have about 10,000, and it's a 45th anniversary, so make it 45,000. And Resurgence is a kind of magazine which is more holistic, you can say, bringing science, arts, spirituality, ecology all together, masculine, feminine, all together. So, and I would like you to subscribe. There's a stall in the room there, but also write. Because if you want to change the world, the power of words is very important. And we don't want just a few writers like on the stage, but we want many, many more people to communicate. So write, learn to write. So my plan is to inspire people to write, and write for Resurgence, but write for any other publication, write books, write poems, communicate through songs, singing for any big movement. Songs are very important. I was growing up in the 60s, and remember John Lennon, remember Bob Dylan, remember John Baez, remember those wonderful singers. We don't have so many singers at this moment. No. Where are they? Where are you? So become singers. And I remember those disco dancing and twisting and so on in the 60s. Where is that dance now? Dance for a transformation, dance for change of consciousness. So that's what I would like people to be, the change they want to see in the world. And subscribe to Resurgence.